Welcome, everyone. This is the November Legislative Action Committee meeting for Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. Really excited to have you with us today as we talk about what's going on legislatively and around the community, around the state. So, Amy, you can go to the next slide. I wanted to, okay. Yep, perfect. So we have some guests, or at least one guest today. Ashley Halliday Schmantz and Yara Brown, if she's able to join us, to talk about some of the things that they're doing with data and advocacy, which is super impressive in their neck of the woods. Eric, if he can get on, will give some federal updates, and I'll be walking through some state updates. We'll also talk a little bit about what Micah is doing, and then want to hear from you and where do you come in terms of advocacy for the rest of the year. So really excited about that. But first, I did want to welcome a new colleague that we have. It's always nice to see all of my colleagues on and those that we work with around the state, but we have a new colleague at Micah who's her name is Aisha Wilson, and she's on the call with us today. She is coming on as our manager of authentic engagement, and she's doing a variety of work, some of which will be working with persons with lived experience and some of our internal DEI work that we're doing. And she'll collaborate in a lot of different things, but for sure in advocacy and on the campaign to end homelessness. And so wanted to give her a warm welcome and say it's really nice for you to be with us.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Aisha. So here she is. All right. And also we wanted to say that we will be sharing slides and links in the chat as we go along. But don't worry if you don't catch everything. We will email out a copy of the slides as well as the links after the meeting, so you can, if you want to focus on just listening, you can be sure to do that. All right, and without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers for today, our guest speakers. So Ashley Halliday Schmantz is currently serving as the director of the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness. With a career spanning over a decade dedicating to ending homelessness and housing insecurity, Ashley brings an impressive track record to her role. In 2020, Ashley assumed the pivotal position of director, overseeing the strategic efforts to combat homelessness in Northwest Michigan. Prior to this, she played a crucial role in the Grand Traverse region, the Greater Grand Traverse region, first as a housing-based case manager and then as a program manager with Northwest Community Action Agency. Currently, Ashley serves on the board of directors for Housing North, and she is the co-chair for the Michigan Homeless Policy Council, and she also serves on the steering committee for the Northwest Michigan Regional Housing Partnership. Her unwavering commitment is instrumental in making homelessness a rare, brief, and one-time occurrence across Northwest Michigan. And I'll just tell you about Yara Brown in case she does join us, but she joined Housing North in May of 2020, and she brings over 15 years working for a nonprofit. She spent over 12 years working for the Leelanau Conservancy and has a diverse background in real estate transactions, project management, watershed and strategic planning, mapping, and other technical skills. Her background also includes working with diverse groups of people, from landowners to government employees, lake associations, township officials, and many more. She is part of the executive committee of Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness and sits on the board of the Fair Housing Center for West Michigan. She also served on the Cleveland Township Planning Commission in Leelanau County for 2.5 years. And she also lives in Leelanau County with her husband and daughter. And I will quickly tell you about the organization Housing North, or the Northwest Michigan Rural Housing Partnership. It was formed in 2018 and was born out of the Networks Northwest. Housing North is the regional lead for the statewide housing plan in their area. They focus on removing barriers to housing in the 10-county region including Wexford and Missaukee counties, through communication and awareness, policy and advocacy, and capacity building, all focused on housing. Their mission is to build awareness, influence policy, and expand capacity so that communities can create housing solutions that meet people's unique needs. And their vision is that Northwest Michigan will be a place where families of all income levels can find homes that are safe and affordable. And with that, I will turn it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Lisa. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. I just shut off my video because for some reason that was freezing us up. So, good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk a lot about some of the work that Housing North did in partnership with a consulting firm to do something called the Housing Needs Assessment. We're also going to talk about the coalition's data around ending homelessness and kind of how those two things intersect, and then how we use the Housing Needs Assessment in our advocacy and our communications around the work to end homelessness. So we'll have time for questions at the end, but if you want to throw them in the chat as we go, that's cool too. Next slide. All right, so we already went over what Housing North does, but what the coalition does is we're the COC lead, right? So we're the Continuum of Care lead for the 5-county region, and I'm the COC director. Next slide. So why do we collaborate? Housing North is not an organization that puts people into housing. They're, from the description Lisa gave, they're really focused on the advocacy and getting more housing kind of in the region to make sure that everyone has access to it, but they are not the entity placing people into it. But we both know that housing is what will end homelessness, right? So we collaborate because of that reason alone. But then when you look at the vision alignment, it's pretty close. It's pretty close to the COC or the coalition's vision. We envision thriving communities where all people experiencing homelessness have access to housing. And Housing North is where families of all income levels can find access to housing, right? So very closely aligned in mission and vision. So it really just makes sense. Next slide. So why do we use data? I think when we're talking especially about the homelessness sector using data, there's a lot of times like just this feeling of, oh, I don't want to do that. And then people get wrapped up in HMIS language, all of this stuff. What we're trying to do is build confidence in the work. So if we can take all of that HMIS data and present it to the public and present it to our partners in a way that actually makes sense, it helps inform our work and it helps people support us. It informs our work, our strategies considerably, but that's the type of data that we talk about. We're getting into the weeds with that data, right? And I'll kind of give you a little taste of that. But that's not for the public level. Public level, we're talking about things like how many people are homeless? How many 1-bedroom apartments do we need? How many people are chronically homeless? How many families are on the street? Things like that people can kind of digest. And from that, we want to create talking points to help people build engagement that they can really feel good about, and awareness building around our work. Next slide. So I'm not sure Yara's doing an economic summit today. So if she can talk about this, she can.
Actually, I am here. So if you do want me to
do this one then?
Yeah, I can just, I guess, briefly share that, this housing needs assessment is a different study than we had in the past, and we're really excited about it because we do feel like it is a real accurate picture of where we are from 2022 to present, where the data was actually collected in real time and then used it to make projections into 2027. And so Ashley's going to go over it as it relates to your work, but I think you can see on the slide here, there were, 7 key factors, 6 that went into it that really did look at, not just demographics, but household size, and then also what's happening in our region, which is impacting the overall availability of housing. So I know Ashley's going to go into more detail, but I will just say that in our region, we have an extremely low vacancy rate, which is what came out of this study, 0.7%. In an ideal market, you want it to be between 4 and 6%. So I think that was really telling that we do have a huge need for number of units in our region across the income spectrum. So I'll turn it back to you, Ashley, if you want to add any more.
Thanks. Yeah, so like Yarrow said, the housing needs assessment, what is it, Yarrow, like 600 pages?
Yes.
Some ungodly thing. So, but it does these key things, right? It's going to talk about how many units you need for home ownership, how many you need for people making different, across the income spectrum. So we really took that and dug down even deeper and pulled out specific things that relate to the work and homelessness. Next slide.
Ashley, this is Amy. I just had a question. Did you guys conduct this independently, and if you're getting to that later, I can wait?
Nope, I'll let Yarrow answer that one.
Yeah, so we fundraised at Housing North for this to cover all 10 counties, and it is a countywide assessment. So we raised about $85,000 to get this full spectrum study, and then some communities did an add-on service to get a community assessment for their own municipality, if it made sense based on their population. But we did privately fundraise for this for our 10 county region.
Thank you.
Yep, good question. Oh, this is just more of high level stuff it went over. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is one of those data points that we use to inform the work to homelessness. So with people experiencing homelessness, if we're being really realistic, we're not concerned about how many single family homes for people to purchase. That information is important, right? It does show the spectrum of housing need in our community. We really want to drill down into the rental gap, which is considerable. So this is one thing that we use. How many units we'll need through 2027, but then we even dig deeper. And I believe it's on the next slide, if you can go to that. Oh, maybe I didn't include it, but so even within the rental gap, okay, there's data suggesting how many 1-bedrooms you need, how many, family rental units you need, and then within the income spectrum. So we're obviously, if you broaden it, we're looking at 0 to about 50% of the area median income of what we're looking at. But when we're thinking about ending chronic homelessness or really population specific, we're really targeting the 0 to 30% of the area median income. And there's some data to pull out on that. So next slide. And I believe Yarrow mentioned this. So this is the slide that we use the most when we're talking about the need. We can't anymore, anyone, it's not just our region, anyone in the country cannot get away with saying, we don't have any housing, or we can't end homelessness because there's not enough housing. That's true for pretty much every community anymore. So you really have to get specific. What does that mean? What types do you need? How much do you need? And what's your vacancy rate? So this slide, it was just great. We were like, oh, it's true. There is no housing here. So if we're thinking about Grand Traverse County, our Grand Traverse County vacancy rate is 0.9. But then if we dig even deeper for tax credit, and government subsidy, which is where people experiencing homelessness are primarily getting housed, it's 0 or 0.4, right? So there's absolutely no movement within tax credit properties in Grand Traverse County. There's very, very little movement within government subsidy. So when we were informing our plan, we're doing a strategic plan to end chronic homelessness by 2028. In doing that, we knew, but because of this slide, we're going to have to build more. We're going to have to build, buy, invest. We can't just reallocate. We can do some reallocation of existing properties and look at prioritization. We can do things like that, but we're really going to need to get more. So that helped us inform that plan. Next slide. And this one, this is another great, this is more like a community awareness slide. And I know it's really small, but when we're thinking about people experiencing homelessness, we're talking about people on the margins. Generally, when a community is talking about the need for housing, they're talking about market rate housing or workforce housing. We can say, yeah, and like, here's that need, and think about the people who are marginalized kind of beyond that. If it's this hard for people who are, let's pull one out, a cashier making about $27,000 a year to rent a place in Grand Traverse County, they can't do it. To own a place in Grand Traverse County, they can't do it. And you can just go down the list. I mean, in Grand Traverse County, are they all red? Oh no, there's a couple. There's a couple greens. If you see a red X, it means that based on what they make, they cannot afford to live in that county. And so this really kind of hits home to people. Oh, you know, it also speaks to that. What if they just get a job? You know, all those homeless people, they need to get jobs. Well, look at this. Even when people get jobs, they can't afford to live most places in our 10 county region, right? So it can be kind of that back end too. Next slide.
Ashley, I'm sorry, it's Amy again. May I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
This data to me is so critical because, I mean, you have a multi-million-dollar tourism industry up there, which I am one of those people that come from, you know, downstate and spend my summer there and put these people out of a home probably. But I mean, this to me gives you really concrete data for your Chamber of Commerce, for your business associations, for your lobbyists to say, you're not just saying it because it's the right thing to do. You're saying you're not going to have any people to fill these jobs who literally are the backbone of that industry. So, I mean, this to me, I think is so powerful from a economic persuasive point of view to the people who own the Grand Traverse Resort or whatever, realtors, real estate agents. I mean, that this puts the, you know, rubber to the road of that it's not going to be sustainable.
Yep, exactly. And we just had a Housing North put on the Regional Housing Summit, and this slide, as being in the audience, this was the one that I felt like really hit home for people when, I mean, the guy who did, or the consulting firm that put together this study went through all of it, and it's a lot. It's 700 pages, you know, and it's data, and people were kind of glazing over. But when he showed this one, people were like, oh, you know, and it was those folks in the room who you were just talking about that really, you know, their eyes opened up a little bit. Next slide. So I think I went over this, but just kind of bullet point how we use that housing needs assessment. We cite the assessment in presentations. We also cite it in interviews with media. So for an example, anytime that we are talking to the media and they're saying, well, what can be done? And we're like, more housing. We always cite, and this is about how many units we need, and this is the vacancy rate, and what does the vacancy rate mean? And we work that into every single interview that we give, so that the public is also able to see it. And then we have a communications and marketing committee within the COC, and that group takes the housing needs assessment, pulls out these things that I'm talking about, creates talking points around them, and shares them with the partners so that every partner agency within the COC is saying the same thing. So we don't have, thanks, Yarrow. Yarrow's gonna have to leave, but you can email her with any questions. So we're, one person isn't saying we need 1 million units, and then another person saying we're good on housing. We're speaking from the same playbook. And it helps us prove that housing actually does end homelessness. Next slide. And then I'll end with this. This is more the in the weeds stuff. And this is something we share in our newsletter, our COC newsletter, but it's really for people kind of embedded within the work. We have a monthly inflow outflow. So how many people are coming into homelessness every month? How many are getting housed? We have how many people are being diverted away from the homeless response system. We have demographic info, and then where people are not where, but what types of programs and how people are actually getting housed. And we share this with the public. And you can go to the next slide. I think there's an example of this. Ooh, not that. Next one. That's the in the weeds one, right? That's scary. This is what we show the public. And even this is tough. So the thing on the right is where we get the most engagement. Ending homelessness, one household at a time. This is how many people became housed in September 2023. This is a real image. These partners all post it to their social media, to their newsletter, whatever they want to use as outreach. That's the one that gets the most interaction. The one on the left is kind of the real deal. So this is inflow outflow. We used to only show the graphic, and then people are like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. I came up with this is what we mean. And people really did engage. The people who want to know more really engaged with that. So it's showing simply how many people came into homelessness, 32. How many were new to homelessness that month? 18. And then 14 of them were returning. There's 267 actively homeless. And then how many people got housed, and what that means. So September was a great month to look at because they all got housed. But sometimes that number, maybe it was 30, 25 got housed, 5 went to, maybe 3 went to jail, 2 we lost contact with them. So it will kind of break that down. That also helps increase transparency and helps people, you're not keeping secrets from the public. We do a lot of public engagement here. And there's always questions about the data. When you just put it out there in a way that people can kind of digest, they can't digest this for this. I can barely do that, and I know that number. So when you get it in a way that you can see it, read it, and you're not hiding anything, it really helps.
This is great. I think you're breaking up a little bit, but I did have quick questions. No, I think most of it was clear. 2 quick questions about the needs, and this is the best representation that I've seen for how, inflow and outflow and this homeless response system for the public and also for partners. It's really easy to follow. It's wonderful. On your housing needs assessment, how long did it take you to raise the money, and how long did it take the assessment to happen?
I have no idea, but I can ask Yarrow.
Okay,
sorry.
What's your question?
I'm pretty well, you know what? I'm pretty sure. So the fundraising part, it's not going to be that long because I'm fairly certain they got a grant from the Fry Foundation. So they did a big foundation grant with Fry, and then I believe they also did a Rotary grant locally. but we can ask Yarrow.
Great. All right, is that it? I think, oh, there are some links. So we have a question about your plan for using the data going forward from Terry about, you know, your drive new housing developments with, you know, assisted housing.
Great question. So right now we're working on 3 LIHTC applications, either going to be submitted or are currently in the works, or have been submitted and already got denied. This data speaks to that, right? So these are the things when we talk about, when we're talking to developers, we're using this data to inform that. But I think it mostly, like what I said before, it went back to, we're going to have to build. We cannot reallocate anymore. We can't use existing stock anymore because people aren't leaving. And there's not enough. There's simply not enough. So what we had to do, we actually had to ask one of our nonprofit organizations that had very little history in development to essentially become a nonprofit developer. And thank goodness they said yes. It wasn't easy, and they have the ability to do that, but we essentially had to create another nonprofit developer to do this. We have one in our 5-county region, and as you can see, the development rate for our folks is just not there. It's just not happening.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Do you have anything else you want?
I think Lisa, we have another Lisa asking.
Hi, thanks, Ashley. This was really fascinating. Appreciate the details of the data of needing the supply, but also at what price point. So that's really great. I'm curious on slide 13. I noticed that Manistee had slightly higher vacancy rates, and just was curious if you knew any reasons behind those numbers.
We don't cover Manistee anymore. That's a balance of state, COC community. What I remember though, from the Housing Summit presentation, someone else called that out. And I believe the consultant said it was because something just came online. So they there was some movement there. But now I can't remember if that's exactly what he was referring to, but I know he mentioned Manistee as when they did the study, a new development was just coming online. That could be it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'll email Yarrow and thank her as well. This is like a master class in, you know, community data and engagement and how to use it effectively. This is really wonderful.
Thanks for having us, Lisa.
Thank you. All right, we can go to the next slide now and turn it over to Eric for some federal updates.
Hello, everyone. I had my camera off because I was freezing up. So if I freeze up again, I may just go blank here again, try to keep talking. Thank you again, Ashley and Yarrow, for your presentation. A lot of great information to give us a lot of ideas on how we can help to get our message out there and motivate change. So let's talk about the federal budget. I think there was something that was going on Capitol Hill. I heard some stuff. I'm not really sure what it was. Oh yeah, House Speaker needed to be selected, so that dragged things out a bit. Before that happened, you know, we have short memories, but before that happened, Congress did pass a continuing resolution. So just reminding everybody, the clock started way back then, a few weeks ago. So Congress has until November 17th to come up with a final spending bill, or we are going to be pushing up against the government shutdown again. This feels a little more awkward than the last time because there are some shenanigans going on already, which are not giving me a good sense of clarity on what's going to be happening. Anybody who happened to see the bill that the House put out for appropriations for supporting Israel. There was an additional piece added to that that would have taken hundreds of millions of dollars away from the IRS. So this is the kind of stuff that I anticipate we're going to continue to see going forward, that there will be some individuals who are trying to tack on amendments and or otherwise undermine some of the legislation that the Republicans will be wanting to pursue. So please, keep in mind, some of this stuff may go on for a while and we may see another change in the House leadership if stuff can't get done. But we are at peril of a government shutdown. So that's why it's really important for us to make sure that we are active here and being educated and reaching out to members of Congress. So before I digress too much, the good news is the Senate seems to have things together. They did pass a minibus last week, which was actually when they chop up the budget into smaller pieces where they take different budgets and pull them together. So the military, construction, VA, agriculture, and THUD budgets were all passed through a minibus. The good news is it was bipartisan. It was, I think, 84-16 as a vote, which overwhelmingly indicates there was bipartisan support for this legislation. So that is the good news. Next slide. Please. There we go. So I just wanted to toss up what we have shared in the past, but these are to give you, remind you, or to give you an idea of what actual numbers the House and the Senate were looking at as they were putting together their initial proposed spending bills. So I just wanted you to see that they were both proposing increases, though the Senate higher than what the House was looking at. So let's go into the next slide, please. Unfortunately, when we were looking at the HCV contracts, we were looking at numbers that became outdated when we think in terms of the costs associated with the housing choice vouchers at the local level. And so there is a new analysis that's done, which is showing that those two draft budgets that I just showed you, the proposed increases, actually would be a net loss of 6,000 vouchers through the Senate's appropriations bill, and looking at up to 40,000 vouchers being lost through the House bill. So it's an increase overall when we look at the HUD budget, but it does have a negative impact when we look at the vouchers themselves. So we have to continue to be advocates for additional funding for vouchers, or we're going to be netting a loss. So we're going to be providing you an update on the budget chart that we've shared before to let you see what the breakdown is on a number of programs, 25 programs in that budget. And then we have a full analysis of the House proposal and overview of the Senate proposal. Thank you to the National Low Income Housing Coalition for putting those together, but we'll be dropping those into the chat for you just to make sure you're aware of both of those in the background. So next slide, please.
Eric, may I ask you a quick question? It's probably answered on the prior slide, but why is the amount so much so much more different between the two bills? Is it just the dollar amount in the voucher loss? It's like 6 times.
Yeah, it's because of the difference of what was proposed in the House's line item with respect to vouchers. So it's just simply math.
Yeah.
Fair question. Next slide, please. Okay, so the House was going to be taking action last week, couldn't get things together, so they are intending to take action this week, have a vote on the THUD bill, but there are several amendments which I'll talk about, which is where the shenanigans begin, and it's pretty significant stuff. So as we were talking about what was proposed in the original bill through the House and the Senate, a lot of work done by advocates to make sure there weren't cuts, which is good news. And so we saw some increases in those budgets, or would be seeing increases in Native housing, Native American housing, homeless assistance grants, and housing choice vouchers. But I did talk about that not being a sufficient level, even with the increase for HCV funding. Next slide, please. So let's let the games begin. We are talking about what was in the appropriations bill, but there are numerous Republican amendments that would be cutting investments in affordable housing and homelessness. So let me just go through a few of those. Eliminating funding for HOPWA programming, cutting in half the funding for the community block grants, reducing HUD funding by $4.95 billion, or reducing it by 0.8%, or reducing it to the fiscal year 19 levels, cutting for fair housing activities, cutting funding from the HUD Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. Some pretty significant program areas, quite honestly, that the House on the Republican side is looking to slip in to this. Next slide, please. So beyond the financial stuff, you also have to be aware that there are other things that can be added into these appropriation bills to wreak havoc or to help advance somebody's particular pet causes. So here are some examples of amendments. Preventing HUD from advancing racial equity. A lot of work has been done, and these are ways that would chip away at that. Also would be preventing HUD from expressing concern about HUD's diversity, or would be expressing concerns about HUD's diversity council that was created. Weakening HUD's equal access rule, which we've talked about in the past and how long it's taken to have that one reshaped, that would allow shelters to discriminate against transgender individuals experiencing homelessness. It would express, an amendment would express support for drug testing for HUD residents. We know that that's really a punitive action quite often. Express support for studies on marital demographics and assisted housing. So want to know how many folks are not married that are going into programs, and again, some judgment there and potential punitive action being taken if that moves forward. And then limiting access to shelter for migrant households. A lot of common themes I think you've heard over the years, but these are the kinds of things that can get slipped into a spending package, into an appropriations bill. So we have to be aware of it, and we have to be vigilant so that these types of things don't actually make their way into law. Next slide, please. Thank you. So with that all said, we still have some time. There is a continuing resolution, as I said. We've got through November 17th, which is a smaller window, but we really do need to have strong voices, not only with respect to some of the amendments that would place some cuts within the appropriations bill, but also some of the other non-spending components that could be tacked on as well. So asking you to please, if you haven't so far, or even if you have in the past, please make an effort to reach out to our two senators who, as you know, have been by and large very supportive with respect to affordable housing and homeless services, but reach out to them in support, but also our representatives, particularly on the Republican side, if you have the ability to do that, to talk about expanding investments, not cutting investments in affordable, accessible homes through the spending bill. Then beyond the, and we'll have a link so that you can actually access information to get to them more quickly, to contact them. But also there is a sign-on letter. We'll have more information about that. We've shared this in the past, but the Campaign for Housing and Community Development Funding is calling for Congress to oppose budget cuts. And so this is just a continuation of that. If you have not already joined in on that, I would encourage your organization to please sign on to it. 2,100 agencies so far. Would love to have other organizations from Michigan join in on that. Next slide, please. So there's also another sign-on letter. I just wanted to point this out. We've talked about this in the past, but the Eviction Crisis Act was introduced in the Senate. There is it's bipartisan in nature. There's also a companion bill in the House entitled Stable Families Act. Would create a permanent emergency rental assistance program that would provide financial assistance and stability services to low-income housing households facing an unexpected economic shock. And so we'll also be dropping a link in so that you can join in on that sign-on letter in support of that legislation as well. Next slide. So last but not least, we've been dropping this in over the last, 6, 7, 8 months as a slide, just so that you know that you can go to the National Low Income Housing Center Action Center. There is more information there about how you can get engaged as an individual or through your organization. Just put this out there as a reminder to you to take a look at it if you're interested, if you want to get a little bit more engaged in some advocacy work. But now is the time for us to do this. It's really imperative, especially when we think in terms of the House of Representatives being somewhat in disarray at this point, that we can't let our guard down, and we really need to be moving forward with respect to supporting these long, hard-earned increases that we were able to fight for to get additional funding to carry out the work that we know is so important in the state. So now is the time to be speaking up. If you haven't done it so far, this is kind of a critical point. So please allocate a little bit of time if you can. Doesn't take a lot of time to be picking up the phone and or sending an email out to your members of Congress. So really encourage you to do that.
Thank
And
you,
so
Eric.
I'm off the soapbox now, but
All right.
questions?
I don't see any.
Okay.
Can't see people's hand. Well, I don't see any. A lot of the information's in the chat, and again, we'll be following up. But thank you, Eric. And next slide, Amy, please.
I just wanted to add for Homeless Awareness Month, one of our sub-themes is called Voice, in addition to voting and volunteering. Under that guise of voice is just as the image, like amplifying your voice. So a lot of these links I'm going to have in social media images that you can put in your own newsletters or your own social media platforms to drive folks to this action. So not just for your own agency, but if you need content for newsletters and social media platforms for Homeless Awareness Month, you can use those to get more activity around this as well.
Thanks, Amy. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about some updates on the state side, and you're welcome, Courtney, one of our National Low-Income Housing Coalition partners. Our source of income protections did pass the Senate last month. We're very excited about that. We have not enjoyed a hearing in the House committee. So chances are, with perhaps a week left in the legislative session for this year, it goes, again, it's a 2-year cycle, so it goes next year, but may not have any action yet. Word has it that the legislature will end their session on the 9th, potentially, which is next week. So we'll see. I mean, this week. Next week is the end of the potential end of the continuing resolution. So a lot happening in this short month. But we do have a sign-on letter for organizations or individuals to voice their support for the source of income protections legislation. And we're also getting support letters from municipalities that either have it or support the statewide legislation. Next one, please, Amy. And just really no updates on any of these. Some have had hearings, most have not yet. Fair Chance had a hearing, but no vote. 4878 and others are still waiting for committee hearings. And there's a couple other bills in the works that may or may not get introduced yet before the end of the session this year. Junk rental fees bill, an eviction ceiling and expungement bill, and one on that includes application fees. So on the next slide, there's been a lot of activity in the House. They had a couple late sessions last week, and a lot of additional new legislation was just introduced, some of which kind of overlap with some of the other things either being worked on. You see an expungement of eviction records bill and a few things around housing. Some of these nibble around the edges or are similar to other ones, so we'll see what happens. But there was one that was passed last week, the Fair Chance bill that focused on juvenile records that would not have to be disclosed in the rental application process. So that did pass with one Republican vote. So that's good. Next slide, please. Also got introduced recently a package of bills on manufactured housing that this is the third time it's been introduced, and it will add additional protections for folks that are living in those kind of communities. Either they can have more disclosures, more information, more opportunities to purchase the communities if they go up for sale. And so there's a sign-on letter that MH Action, one of our partners, is getting out there. Hopefully you'll be interested in signing it to support this legislation. Hasn't had a hearing yet, so it may not yet this year, but it's definitely important legislation for manufactured housing communities, which is a lot of low income and affordable opportunities for people to get into housing. Next slide, please. Wanted to call your attention, if you weren't already aware, that tomorrow is election day across Michigan and across the country. And there may not be very many things in your community to vote for. We only had 2 here where I live, a mayor and a city council, but there are 195 ballot proposals across the state. So be sure and check and vote however you can. If you do it by absentee ballot or going to the polls tomorrow, it's really important to make your voice heard. And as Susan B. Anthony said, somebody struggled for our right to vote. So make sure you use that right and exercise your right. Next slide, please. Another opportunity to make your, your voice heard and your opinion known to HUD. HUD has a rulemaking proposal to eliminate restrictions that they currently have on people that act as fair housing testers. So they're proposing to eliminate the restriction for people that have felony convictions or other convictions acting as fair housing testers. So Ashley, thank you. She put the link in the chat, and you can make comment on this proposed rule change. And the open comment period is until December 29th of this year. Next slide, please. Other opportunity for those of you around the state, we are putting together a peer learning community around criminalization of homelessness, talking about the incidences, alternatives to criminalization, working with your municipal leaders and other, community members and advocates, and just hearing about experiences. We had a panel at the summit last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, just to hear about this issue, and heard a lot of really pointed incidences around the state, cutting down trees so that they could see people's tents and tarps, closing roads in parks so people can't get down to areas where they're camping. So it's really concerning to hear about these incidences. And so we're going to be putting together a group of people to talk about this, and we'll coordinate a meeting either the end of this month or in December, and you can email me if you're interested in being on that list to participate. Next slide, please. And so we want to hear from you. Now's the time. If there are any issues that you want to, any wins. I know I just saw Washtenaws newsletter. You had a very exciting win with your county commissioners. A lot of money for housing and sheltering, as well as other things in Washtenaw. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that or anything else going on. You can feel free to put it in chat as well if you're, yeah, Terry. I don't know if Amanda's still on. I saw she was on earlier, but really impressive, funding for sheltering, but also for a lot of other important things for people, unbanked, people that, do not have a regular, FDIC banking, relationship, and some just really thoughtful kind of things for people that are low income, unhoused. They've been doing a lot of really good work. So now is the time that a lot of communities are standing up winter shelters. I know a lot of communities are, and it takes a lot of volunteers and effort, as well as funding to do that. And so I salute all of you that are doing that. It's a really important effort that people stand up during the cold months here.
Lisa, I just wanted to point out that when we think in terms of like the work in Washtenaw County, that there are still ARPA funds that are available, that there are municipalities, counties that have not dedicated those funds yet. They waited. There was a long period of time available to actually commit those funds. And so if you don't know, it would be good to reach out to your units of government and find out what their plan is, if indeed they have dollars that have not been earmarked yet. It would not be too late to be putting a plug in for homeless services or investments into affordable housing in your community.
Thanks, Eric. Just a little more detail on Washtenaw. They passed a resolution for $2.18 million, which would support investments in eviction prevention, shelter conversion, winter shelter staffing and support, short-term hoteling, cash assistance, support for unbanked and underbanked folks, and rapid rehousing services. So they're doing a lot of really creative and interesting things, as well as doing direct cash assistance for up to 1 year for families and individuals currently experiencing homelessness or housing stability. So I'm sure we'll be following this in the future. So thank you for those of you that weighed in the chat. Thanks for participating today. Next slide. We have a few more updates quickly in the last few minutes. We are offering a training on Monday, November 20th. This one is going to be case notes and homeless services. It's going to be at 1 o'clock to 2:30. So if you're in this realm, you can, thank you, Ashley. The link is right there for you to sign up. As well as Amy talked about it before, but this is Homeless Awareness Month this November. And so our theme is we each have a role to play in ending homelessness. And Amy's put together just a whole suite of wonderful a toolkit and images that you can use and post for social media. There's also a calendar to register if your community is having or your agency is doing any kind of event. And then, you know, a blog to talk about what you're doing, project ideas and templates. So really appreciate all that great information. And so it's really a great way if you're feeling like you're running out of time. There's still time, and there's some great, you know, things you can plug and play. So next slide, please.
And Lisa, I just wanted to stress, even though November has started, as Lisa said, it's absolutely not too late. There's a whole blog just on ways you can participate in Homeless Awareness Month. That would be like 5 minutes or less. So don't be dissuaded if you still want to participate. We give lots of suggestions and options and support for things you can pull together in pretty short order. Thanks.
Just wanted to mention that we are going to be doing some outreach around our policy priorities. You see our 2023 ones here. And while many of them are still very an issue, very much a priority and things that we're working on, we want to be thoughtful in, you know, asking all of you, our colleagues and people out in the field, if there are things that are missing, if there are things that you think should be added, or if there's anything there that's really not a priority that you feel doesn't take precedence. So we'll be doing some outreach, and if you have some thoughts on this, we'd love to hear from you, but look for some more outreach from us in the coming weeks. And finally, you can always follow us on social media. You can sign up for our newsletter. Amy does a great job with our website as well. Lots of opportunities. We have a blog going. So if you have ideas for our blog, we'd love to hear from you. Ashley's going to be writing one on some voting and voter registration events that we did last month, or actually in September, in with some student groups at 2 shelters in Michigan. So it was a really great way of honoring National Voter Registration Day. So we have 3 minutes left. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or comments or any updates to share. If not, thank you for participating, and you have 2.5 minutes back in your schedule, so hopefully you can make your plans to vote tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the month, and we'll look forward to seeing you in December.